to get enough clearance to get the struts out and to put the struts in, we actually disconnected the bolts on the subframe that hold the subframe, this aluminum crossmember or subframe to the car, the rear and the front main bolts here, and there's the diagonal cross braces. We still have it being supported up here in the front, but what that does is it allows the steering rack to come down a little bit, and the whole suspension arm to come down a little bit to give us clearance to slide the strut in without hitting the top of the fender here. So the strut just goes in this hole, and what captures the strut is there's a little tab on the strut, and this little hole on the side has a bolt that goes through. The bolt actually connects to the drop link for the sway bar. That holds the whole assembly together. We've taken off the brake rotor, or the brake caliper, and tied it up out of the way, and we've taken off the little clips for the brake pad sensor and the ABS sensor, which is here, but this is the plug for it to give us enough swing to get that carrier away from the body. So now we'll take the strut, and we're just going to slide it down into here and pull down a little bit and get the top up into the three mounting holes up here. You can see these mounting holes are slotted. That's how we set the camber adjustment of the wheel. As the top of this strut moves inward, it's going to tilt the top of the wheel inboard more and give more negative camber to the wheel. And then of course out is for less negative camber. This is the new front strut ready to go in, right from Porsche. It's the Bilstein, I assume it's the Bilstein Sport Shock. So we've got the step on the bottom perch for the spring. So when we put this together, we have to make sure that we line that step up with the spring here, like that. And the way Porsche does all their springs, there's color coding. This one has a red and a yellow and a blue up here. You can see that the old spring had a blue and a gray and a green. Now exactly what those colors mean, your guess is as good as mine. You probably have to work at Porsche to figure that out. So what else is going to go on this shaft is we've got a bump stop which is going to go on, which actually we have to probably put on before the spring. It's a little torn at the top, so it's falling all the way down, but that'll be fine because it's just to provide a rubber stop between the bottom of the strut and this washer that goes on the top. So these washers, there's actually going to be two of them. They're curved, they're dished. The dished side, the concave side, is going to go down on the bottom washer and up on the top washer.
Spring.
And then we can put the spring on. And then our top perch is made up of a few parts here. There's kind of a rubber piece that's here, and on this one, of course, you can see where the spring spiral had pushed against it last time. So that's going to go on. But the next here, it's actually a two-piece assembly. It's got, it might be hard to pick up in the video, but a little kind of thrust bearing here. It's got some grease on it between the plastic and the metal bits, and this has little corresponding tabs which kind of interlock with it. So you want to make sure it gets put on in the right place, and it kind of locks in place. But what this does is this provides a thrust bearing, so when the whole unit is assembled, the strut and the spring can turn or pivot without binding, and that's to help with your steering. So then, this is going to go, in fact, I have to put this together. I'm going to put the rubber on here first, and then this goes in place right over the shaft. Now, these springs, these are the rest of world Porsche springs. Put that down so I can line the spring up with the perch here. There we go. So we'll be able to just push this down a little bit to get the nut put on the top. But there's a few things I want to point out on this top perch, and that is there are two arrows. An arrow right here by this stud and an arrow right here by that stud. These arrows go along, they point to the front and the rear of the car. So this will be the inboard stud, and then these two are the outboard studs. there is a little bit of a taper in this perch here, so if you put it in wrong, it could cause a problem. For changing the rear shocks on the Boxster, I did it a little bit differently than kind of the conventional wisdom that I found online and in the factory service manual. A lot of those told you to break the tapered ball joint pins here and here to get the carrier to swing out. But since we're going to have to do an alignment anyways, I figured we might as well just undo the bolt that holds in the lower control arm and also the toe link. So that would be the bolt hole in that spot and in this spot up in here. And of course we also had to undo the drive shaft so that the carrier could come out, and we tied up our caliper to keep it out of the way. But this allowed us to bring the strut downward enough that we were then able to lift it up and wiggle it out of the carrier. So we'll get the new one ready to put in and put it all back together. And it took probably, I don't know, 30 minutes to undo all of that. We've got the new rear spring, the new rear strut, and then the assembly of stuff from the old one. We've got the bump stop, that's going to go on first. We've got this one washer, concave side down. This is the plastic spring perch. It's important that you see these notches. They're going to line up with the heads of the studs under here, like this. Now it's important to note that these are not evenly spaced around the circle. So, it doesn't go that way, because obviously that stud's not lining up. It won't go that way. This one's not lining up. So you have to get it just right so that all three of those line up in their notches. And then we're going to have the top washer, concave side up, and then the nut, which goes on top. For the rear suspension of the Boxster, and the same with the 996, this is your toe link control, and it's essentially, on your front, this would be used for the steering to turn the bearing carrier. But on the rear, since we don't have steering, it's just a fixed link. So there's a slot on this side with a hole in the center, which is part of this toe link, and then the ball joint on the outside. So as this hole moves sideways in that slot, it's going to control how much toe in or toe out you have on this rear wheel. And then for the camber adjustment, it's here. It's got the same sort of slot and the same sort of hole. And when this arm moves downward, it's going to give you more negative camber on the wheel. And when it moves inward, you get less negative camber. So the actual adjustment bolt, it's an eccentric, which means that the head of the bolt is on a different circle or different center line than the shaft of the bolt. And this bolt has a little groove through the threads for a washer, which has a little stub in it that lines up so that it has the same offset, so that the washer on the other side has the same offset as the head. And the idea is when this bolt is in place here, the head of it can push against this little wall on the side of this casting. So when this is all the way in, this would be touching, and then as you turn this with a wrench, it would push against here to push the toe link bar out, and that's how you make your toe adjustment. So now that that is through, we have to line the washer up on the other side, and then we put our nut on the back side. And now it's ready to just snug up, and when we get it all together, we'll do an alignment and use those adjustments to get the toe and the camber just right. To put the new strut assembly in, so we slid the strut into the carrier, and we got our toe link and our lower control arm connected, and then by using the stool to support the brake rotor there, I was able to, with the lift, very, very slowly lower the lift until I got the bolts or the studs coming through here so I could put the nuts on. So that one right there, that's the inboard nut. The one right here is the outboard nut. And then The third one is in this little hole that you access when the trunk is raised. There was a little rubber cap there. So if we look down that hole, I'm not entirely sure it'll show up on the camera here, but the third nut is down in that hole.
So grab it.